Good evening, distinguished guests, esteemed scholars, and respected members of the academic and diplomatic communities. It's both an honor and a privilege to extend a warm welcome to this distinguished gathering for the launch and discussion of Pluralism in India and Indonesia, Diversity in the Quest for Unity. This volume, edited by Professor Shankari Sundaraman and the late Dr. Kapila Vatsyayan, stands as a scholarly testament to the enduring historical and cultural ties between these two great nations. We are gathered today not only to celebrate the publication of this important work, but also to engage in a discourse that reflects the intellectual vibrancy and pluralistic traditions of both India and Indonesia. At the heart of this volume lies a profound inquiry into the trajectories of pluralism and identity politics in two post-colonial societies that have drawn upon their rich civilizational exchanges to navigate the complexities of nation building. The book, structured around themes of history, national identity, religious pluralism, cultural expressions, and globalization, presents a nuanced exploration of how these nations have upheld the ideals of Bhinneka Tunggal Ika and unity in diversity. Bhinneka Tunggal Ika is also national motto of Indonesia, which also means unity in diversity. It's a compelling study that not only deepens our understanding of the past, but also offers insights into the evolving dynamics of pluralism in contemporary times. This volume owes its genesis to the seminal seminar held at the India International Center in February 2018. This volume owes its genesis to the seminal seminar held at the India International Center in February 2018, convened by the late Dr. Kapila Vatsyayan. Under her visionary leadership, the IIC International Research Division sought to advance intra-Asian dialogue through rigorous scholarly engagement. The deliberations of that seminar have now been crystallized into this book, offering a comprehensive academic resource that will contribute significantly to studies on comparative pluralism, political transitions, and intercultural exchange. We are privileged to be in the company of distinguished speakers who have made invaluable contributions to their respective fields. We extend our deepest gratitude to Sri N.N. Vohra, former governor of J&K and life trustee of IIC, for chairing this session and for his long-standing commitment to fostering intellectual discourse. Welcome, sir. We are also honored by the presence of Professor Shankari Sundaraman, whose scholarly rigor and editorial acumen have been instrumental in bringing this volume to fruition. Her editorial work in this volume underscores the critical intersections of politics, culture, and identity in shaping regional dynamics. Welcome, Professor. A special acknowledgement to Her Excellency Ambassador Ina Krishnamurthy for gracing this occasion and for her insights into India-Indonesia relations. Her perspectives on Indonesia's evolving pluralistic identity will undoubtedly add depth to our conversation. Welcome, ma'am. We also extend our deep appreciation to Professor Santishri Dulpadi Pandit, Vice Chancellor of the Jawaharlal Nehru University, whose leadership in the academic space continues to inspire critical engagement with issues of identity, governance, and pluralism. Once again, welcome, ma'am. As we embark on this discussion, let's recognize that the study of pluralism is more than an academic pursuit. It is a commitment to understanding, dialogue, and coexistence. The narratives presented in this book underscore the need for sustained scholarly exchanges and policy dialogues, and that strengthen the foundational ethos of inclusivity in both India and Indonesia. I extend my heartfelt welcome once again as we gather for this significant occasion. It's my privilege to invite the chair to formally launch the book, joined by our distinguished speakers for this ceremonial moment. stand? Would you like to stand? Yeah. Thank you so much. Please join me in welcoming the chair to offer his opening remarks and set our proceedings in motion. Over to you, sir.
You just heard from our Chief Librarian, Mrs. Munshi, a brief synopsis of why we are gathered here this evening. Personally, I'm very happy to have had the opportunity to be invited here. I worked with Dr. Watsayan for a very long period, and this is one of the projects which couldn't get finalized, culminated while she was around. She was losing vision, and at that time she and Professor Shankari were to co-edit, but as it happened, she left us very suddenly, and this entire burden came on Professor Sundararaman to complete this editing and production of this volume. I just wanted to say a few words about the original genesis, what led to. There were several debates in the center and in the then now what is called the International Research Division, which was headed by Dr. Watsayan for 2 decades, very ably supported by Ramachandran, who's here today. And amongst the current themes at that point of time was this entire debate about the ideological attacks on the concepts of secularism, pluralism, and we were getting communal ideologies were beginning to rule the roost. And Mrs. Watsayan, in one of the small group meetings, tested the idea if we were to do something. And in terms of pluralism and secularism and many communities and religions living together, the finest example was of Indonesia. And she had interest in Indonesia for other reasons of term and art and culture, which was her basic background. So we had a larger group meeting, and Ambassador Devre, who is here with us this evening, he was invited to also give his views. He strongly supported the idea of such a conference taking place, and it had to be an international conference, just not between India and Indonesia. And he took the pains of drawing up a very fine concept paper on the basis of which the conference was architectured. And now this is more by way of logistical background, but the essential concern, the serious concerns which remained with Dr. Watsayan for many, many years till she passed away, was the threats to the existence of multiculturalism. We are a multicultural, multilingual, multi-religious country. There is no religion in the world which we don't have. And likewise, Indonesia, which has the largest Muslim population, we have the second largest. We have coexisted in a harmonious environment for centuries. And our historical linkages go to over 2,000 years back. And they got disrupted with the onset of the colonial regimes, the imperial hegemonies, and the relationships we had in trade, in maritime relations, in cultural context, religious context, if I may say so, they They started declining and they withered away. So this, on the basis of Ambassador Devre's concept note, we invited identified scholars from our side and from Indonesia and other major institutions who had done some research and scholarship. And we had a very fine international conference in 2018. 18, yes. And now we are in 2025. There's been delay, but this is perhaps unavoidable in the circumstances. So I will not take more time except to say that the basic theme and the contents of this book and the challenges to pluralism, the concepts, the secularism, and how can, if you cannot manage diversity, I think it is a large question, you cannot manage unity. If diversity cannot be managed and goes astray, then a large country like India with 1.5 billion population, with thousands of languages and thousands of dialects and hundreds of languages, half a dozen religions, and socio-cultural and socio-religious traditions which are founded in thousands of years of recorded history. Now, if these are flouted or flirted with, and radical thought processes start overtaking the principles of governance and societal harmony, then obviously there are large threats looming on the horizon. So I would only hope and pray that this book, by whomsoever it is read in universities, academics, and intelligentsia, would incite some serious discussions on the need of revisiting the crucial importance of preserving multiculturalism and thereby preserving the unity of a country. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. Before I begin, let me at the outset extend my very warm thank you to the chair of our session, Shri N.N. Vora sir, for being here today to to oversee and chair this book launch. I would also like to extend my warmest thank you to both Ambassador Ina Krishnamurthy as well as to my Vice Chancellor, Honorable Vice Chancellor of JNU, my Professor Shanti Sriduli Pandit, for having taken time away from both of their extremely tight schedules to be here. And of course, a very warm welcome to all of you for this book launch. And let me just sort of put together about 10 minutes what this book is all about. I mean, the idea and the conception of the book, as Sir has already said, was clearly rooted in the passion that Dr. Kapila Vatsyayan brought to the entire process. And this passion was actually her entire notion and work on multiculturalism itself. And it's very interesting that in the very first meeting that Ambassador Devre had invited me for to meet with her, sir, I remember she was describing to us that her visit to the University of Yogyakarta, where she saw this cultural linkage between India, and she said when the students came out in the procession, graduation procession, she said, for a minute, I didn't know whether I was in India or whether I was back in India. Or I was in Indonesia, I was back in India. Because the kind of cultural similarity, she said, was so resonant that she said it was amazing for us to see this entire way in which the students came out in that graduation procession. And I'm really thankful to both Ambassador Devre and to Kapila ma'am for having asked me to be part of this conference, not just as a participant in the conference, but also in convening the conference and in helping to put together the edited volume. And I think, as Sir said, yes, there was a delay, without a doubt. But Sir, like they say in Hindi, der hai par ander nahi. So in that sense, I think we have come to the conclusion that the book is now out, and we're quite happy with, I'm very happy to see the volume that has come out. And it would be terrible on my part if I did not thank the steering committee members, of which Ambassador Shyam Saran was one of our main members, in terms of how we sort of conceptualize the entire structure of this conference itself. And I think in that, sir, you've played a very critical role in terms of how you helped us with this whole notion of focusing on the framing of the national identity. And I think that's one of the, from where we sort of took this exploration of pluralism and inclusive identities to this next step. Now, the idea was that both India and Indonesia were close neighbors, and yet in terms of understanding each other, there was this limitation in terms of the domestic understanding. What we tended to do in most conferences or in most works of, the bilateral, exploring the bilateral relationship, what we tended to do was to look at the foreign policy angle and sort of focus on areas that are typically associated with political relations, with economic ties, and with security level ties. For the first time, I think, and I think this has been also endorsed by the message that has come from Devi Fortuna Anwar, who's Dr. Anwar has written the message or the foreword for the book, where she has written that this is the first of its kind where a book is looking at the domestic aspects and the context of each country, trying to understand each country from its domestic angle. And in that sense, I think where we sort of, when the first chapter had to be written, where I sort of drew was from the historical underpinnings that one has studied as a Southeast Asian scholar, and this brought me back to the works of J.S. Furnival, in which the context of a plural society is actually drawn from understanding that traditions actually predate our colonial period. The colonialism did not bring about plurality. Plurality already existed in these regions very vibrantly, and it is that concept that I think that we wanted to sort of focus on, both in the case of Indonesia, as well as looking at the deeper context of India itself. And I think where the clear illustration of this that became for me very important was that while the colonial period reordered our administrative structures and our state structures, the ethos of diversity, the ethos of pluralism that existed within this region had to be encapsulated, because both within Indonesia and in India, the debates ranging around what Sir has said in terms of the communal aspects or the lack of plurality, the threats to secularism, these were emerging. In the case of Indonesia, after 1999, when the democratization phase started, in the case of India from 2014 onwards, because of the change in government. And I think this context of bringing about an understanding, a deeper and a more meaningful understanding of what really constituted plurality in our respective societies was where this entire focus on the plural debate actually took us forward. And in that sense, if you take the first the first part of this introductory part of the book, you see that there are two chapters, one Ambassador Devre's chapter, as well as the chapter that I and Kapila ma'am have co-authored together. Those two focus on the more current aspects of that plural debate. And where I think the volume has been really enriched is Dr. Lokesh Chandra's chapter, where he talks about the classical echoes, because we keep referring to this civilizational connect that we have with Indonesia. And where I think that that chapter actually contributes is that it goes into the essence of that classical understanding of that relationship that was based on our civilizational extents. And he has brought it out beautifully in this, because there is also a very emotive aspect to his chapter, which actually touches a very, very important chord in terms of how we've looked at it. The second broad theme on which these two countries base their national identity, and I think in this particular section of the book, you have almost four writings, four chapters are there. One is Ambassador Shyam Saran's writing, then the writing of Tamalia Alice Jabana, Arif Zamhari, and Professor V. Suryanarayanan. And this refers to the nation building, this section refers to the nation building process itself, and it becomes very clear in terms of how the evolution of these states actually took place. Now, while the paper by Tamalia focuses on the fostering of nationalism with the adoption of a single language policy, I think that where she focuses on the role that her father himself had, because she looks at the role that her father, Sultan Taqdir Alice Jabana, put into the process, where in 1928, the Indonesian state decided to adopt a single language, which is Bahasa Indonesia, as its medium of official language. And compared to that, when you see Ambassador Shyam Saran's writing on the reorganization of the linguistic states, it comes out very clear that the two countries actually adopted extremely diverse options in order to preserve that diversity. On the one hand, Indonesia decided to move in terms of a single language, but it was interesting that at the conference, we got a very, very different viewpoint where several of the scholars who had come from there actually were bemoaning the loss of their own regional languages as a result of this, this imposition of a single language policy. And I still remember, particularly in terms of the Sumatran island and Achinese language that was, that had come to an end, there was a lot of information that came to us that it was a loss of their both languages as well as dialects that existed in the option of this. And I think the example, there of India having, opted for the linguistic pluralism as one of its options, regardless of all the debates that we're seeing today currently in the news. I think that's a choice, and one thing that we made as a very, very, a very sensible choice in that sense in terms of how we preserved our linguistic diversity. I wanted to just bring out that one of the chapters in this section, which I found to be extremely illuminating, is the one by Arif Zamari. Arif Zamari's chapter has actually gone into a focus on the two social organizations that dominate the Indonesian landscape, both the Muhammadiyas and particularly the Nahdlatul Ulama. The Nahdlatul Ulama, of which Arif Zamari himself is a civil activist, has actually been one of the key organizations with about 40 million members who have focused on why this notion of tolerance within the Indonesian society is extremely relevant. And Zamari's work and his chapter on this focuses on the role of the Nahdlatul Ulama in terms of why the Panchashila becomes the focus of the Indonesian state, both after its independence and more so after the democratization, because post-democratization, the question of those, the Islamic groups which had not found its fulfillment under both the Sukarno, then later the Suharto, regimes, these groups sort of moved towards a clamoring towards a more, a vocal identity. And this, Zamari's work actually highlights very critically why this was not the case and why the question of choosing to have Panchashila as the state doctrine becomes very relevant. The third section of the volume, in my own opinion, I must confess, is a little lopsided because nearly 3 chapters did not come through. We are talking about delay, sir. Even today when I stand before you, I have to admit that nearly 3 chapters did not come through for the entire volume. And in this context, I think when you look at the works that have been put forward by Asfa Vidyanto, who again looks at the role of Nahdlatul Ulama, as well as that of Professor Dr. Amin Abdullah, both these offer very rich insights into the social organizations that have no political role and yet have a political angle to it or a discourse to it. They are not actively involved in politics, but these two organizations have a very important role in how the region and the country's constitution and others have been formed. One of the debates which I think at this point is very interesting is how in the post-democratization phase, the question of what they call the Tujuh Kata-Kata or the 7 words in the constitution of Indonesia, which is also known as the Jakarta Charter, becomes extremely relevant. And what this actually talked about is that these 7 words are with obligation to carry out Islamic law for its adherents. And this is where I think the Indonesians, tolerance is very clear, because right from 1945, this issue of the 7 words in the Jakarta Charter has been avoided in the constitution. And the interpretation, if we go back and read, because in the process of having to do this, I had a lot of other reading to do. So if you go back and read the debates itself, what it very clearly says is that though the Jakarta Charter was talked about, it was not talked about from a state perspective. It could have either been an individual's perspective or a state perspective. There is no actual clear-cut answer on who defines the Jakarta Charter. And this is where I think I'll speak a little bit of this later when I come to the paper on the 5th portion of the book, which is on the Aceh conflict also. One of the chapters is there. Now, in this volume, this is the 3rd section, there are 2 very, very methodologically, I would say, beautiful works. One is by Ahmad Kisai, which looks at how religion has played a role in the post-Suharto period, and the other is by Phil Suranto. Suratno's artwork chapter here has specifically talked about what you call the Panchashila village. And this is a method that the government has actually adopted in areas where which are conflict prone, especially religious conflicts. What they have done is to create villages where all the communities of various faiths live together, and there is this constant interaction that they have tried to promote between these faiths as a result of trying to merge the differences and ensure that the context of conflict becomes reduced. And this concept is something that most of us who are, had not even heard of in the Indian context, that Indonesia had these kind of Panchashila villages, and 2 case studies he has taken. That is why I said these chapters are methodologically really rigorous, because the 2 case studies he's taken actually reflect the ground reality on how this issue is emerging there. The 4th part of the book, which is again preserving plural cultures through diverse approaches, actually goes back to that India-Indonesia linkages. Vayan Ardika's chapter on the role of Buddhism in Bali is very, very a beautiful chapter, especially with the kind of art and artifacts that he has put together, because this chapter shows you the linkages that Bali has with the Kalinga Empire and with what you call the remains at Udayagiri and Ratnagiri, where you see the kind of art and artifacts that are so similar between that and what is practiced in Bali. And the similarities of these cultural affinities is actually something which I think finds local underpinnings also, which has a very rich legacy. Now, this chapter has this section of this book has 2 chapters, both by Dr. Sudha Gopalakrishnan as well as by Dr. Gautam Jha, which look at the oral traditions that Indonesia has. And one is that they have taken a rich examination of these plural cultures and how they have actually been fostered into the art of the 2 countries. And here both Sudha's work as well as Gautam's work refer to the role that the Punakavan plays in the context of the Wayang puppetry itself. Now, following this, I think there is a very interesting question that Dr. Gopalakrishnan raises. She says that, how is it that these oral traditions can remain preserved in the larger context of the environment that is changing today? And I think this is a question she sort of really comes to the table, because Kapila ma'am, during many of our conversations, so you'll also remember this, was constantly engaging with the idea of how do you preserve the repositories of knowledge that this region has. I mean, there could be a huge 2,000-year history, but if there is the volumes that are supposed to show the preservation of this history is not there, how do we therefore find evidence of that preservation of these repositories, is something that she had raised at several points. And I remember reaching out to Professor Anthony Reid in Australia to ask whether there is any way that we could access repositories from which we can, cull together this kind of, put together the logic of India and Indonesia's interactions during the entire context. The fifth part of this volume, which is the concluding volume, I think is another very interesting volume, because in this we have papers where there is a crisscrossing of India and Indonesia's worldview that Ambassador Gurjeet has written. And this volume actually brings to light the impact of the global on the local. And there is a very interesting thing, because Rangkuti's paper, Dr. Rangkuti's paper is on, Bollywood is a huge sensation in Indonesia. Anybody who's been and lived there knows the impact that Bollywood has on Indonesia. This is popular culture impacting the plural culture there. And it's very interesting that Rangkuti has drawn out systematic case studies of students having engaged in research related to Bollywood movies. This is the level of, you see the linkage that Dr. Rangkuti brings out in his work. Other than this, Ambassador Gurjeet's paper brings across very, very critical elements of how during the post-1947, the 2 countries actually engage themselves. Where are the areas that they have to further explore, and where is it that you can actually think of the regional context in which India and Indonesia come together. The other paper in this is by Leonardo Chrysostomos. I would actually request all of you to read it, because within all of us, there's an inner child that has looked at the Amar Chitra Katha comics. Similar, when we first saw this title of Dr. Chrysostomo's paper, I remember Ambassador Devare and I discussing, does he mean cosmic or comic? And he actually meant comic, okay? Because he was talking about the Baladeva and the Borobudur comic, and where I find this is plurally very important is that how these two comic books actually draw from the historical past of Indonesia, particularly its Majapahit identity, which is one of the more predominant Hindu kingdoms, in order to explain why plurality is important in the current context where there is greater focus on Islamization, where there's greater tensions happening in the country. And that's where he draws that these comics actually bring back the historical reality to the state, and therefore by bringing this back to the context of where you emerge from, you're focusing on your plural values, not just from the Islamic identity that is there, but also from the past where you draw your other identities from. And if I may just engage in a little moment of self-indulgence, yes, my chapter on Aceh, not because I wrote it, but because Aceh is an extremely interesting case. I've had the fortune of being there during the Ramadan month and having interacted with people during the Ramadan month when it was almost moving into a Sharia law. And Aceh's case study, if you look at it, historically, financially, economically, and in terms of religion, Aceh has offered to Indonesia a diversity that no other region has been able to provide. It has also been the longest standing conflict in Indonesia. So the work that I was able to do as part of a Ford Foundation grant was something where I was able to see the reality of Aceh and how the country post its democratization has been able to bring Aceh into the larger context so that the question of separatism and separatist identities do not linger. So on that note, I'd like to thank you all for being here, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Professor Shankari. In 25 minutes, you've given us a complete rundown on the entire contents of the volume. Now, may I request Her Excellency Ambassador Krishnamurthy to please address the gathering.
Honorable Sri Fora, Professor Satisri Dolipundit Pandit, Ibu Shankari Sundararaman, my friend, my guru, distinguished participant, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Mahatma Gandhi once said, "Unity to be real must stand the severest strain without breaking." This understanding was explicitly captured by Professor Shankari and the late Kapila Vatsyayan in page 18, and I quote, "In today's turbulent world, India and Indonesia stand out as moderate, democratic, and secular states. In fact, the values of tolerance, inclusiveness, and religious plurality, which have long been the hallmarks of both societies, are even more important and significant today." This book is truly a remarkable book because it includes a tapestry of issues, intertwined of understandings on unity, on diversity, on civilization. I wish I was there in the 2018 conference, as I imagine it would be a very interesting discussion in that conference. And I have to admit that I haven't read the whole book. But my deep appreciation to Professor Shankari for reaching out to me way back in 21st January when my head is on my feet on my head, preparing the visit of my president as chief guest of the Republic Day. And because I have no time, in second I said yes, without knowing it is for the launching of the book. And I also would like to thank the IIC for the warm welcome and his hospitality extended to me, and I have my Minister Consular on Social Culture and Information here. His name is Fahmi. Ladies and gentlemen, when I receive a copy of this book from Professor Shankari to prepare for today's remarks, I was intrigued by the title, especially the word quest. and I tried to find out more about the meaning of this word. I found out the word has many meanings. Among others, an attempt to achieve something difficult, a long search for something that is difficult to find, an act of instance of seeking, a pursuit, a search, and the most interesting one is a chivalrous enterprise and medieval romance, usually involving an adventurous journey. From these many meanings, if I may, my personal conclusion is a quest is a journey to achieve something that we envision, and when and if we achieve it, we thrive. Reading this book, we need to emphasize on the word quest, because when we see all the chapters, they show that unity is a journey, not only a destination. Because unity is not how to become one, but it is about a condition forming a jointly complex whole. Ibu Dewi Fortuna Anwar from Indonesia said in her message in the book, Indonesia and India are said to be mirror images to each other. It is very important to understand that the mirror images which were shown in our journey to achieve the unity that we both envision maybe has similar colors and themes when it comes to social and cultural conditions. But of course, our quests are distinct from each other because, like the famous saying, your journey is not the same as mine, and my journey is not yours, but if we meet on certain path, may we encourage each other. Therefore, as we always say that Indonesia and India relationship has been forged over 2 millennia of shared history, shared culture, shared values, I think this book is indeed very important to better understand what factors that have shaped both countries' quest for unity in diversity, and how we encourage each other in the quest through time and space, directly or indirectly, as we share same understanding that national unity in a diverse society such as ours is always an ambition and as well aspiration. Ladies and gentlemen, let me now focus on what I think about the importance of unity in diversity. Promoting unity for a prosperous nation, a strong country, and a just, democratic, and civilized society is key to development and progress. Indonesia indeed has learned the hard way. As an example, Ambassador Gurjit knows this, it is still vivid in my memory, the incidents in May 1998 when Asian economic crisis hit Southeast Asia, including Indonesia, in the strongest term possible. Indonesia was in chaos and even in danger of splitting apart. Some even say that Indonesia, as the biggest archipelagic nation in the world, would experience Balkanization, a term derived from the territorial history of the Balkans, which loosely means the process involving the fragmentation of an area, country, or region into multiple smaller and hostile units. But Bhinneka Tunggal Ika prevails. Unity in diversity of Indonesia is still intact. Not without challenges, of course, but we are still the unitary state of the Republic of Indonesia until today, as envisioned by our founding fathers. As Indonesia and India are among biggest democracies in the world, both of us know very well that democracy is never a miracle, never a gift nor something imposed. It is always hard-earned, often the fruit of many sacrifices. And its ultimate worth depends entirely upon us all, the people. Whether we have the political maturity, the wisdom, the courage to make it work, make it endure. To that end, unity in diversity is significant to make democracy works. Our nations are living proof that pluralism is not a hindrance, but an asset. Ladies and gentlemen, pluralism is not given. It must be nurtured and protected. Pluralism is not a passive state. It requires constant engagement, open dialogue, and a commitment from all players and all levels of the society. As we reflect on the topic this book brings, let us also think about the tangible ways in which we can safeguard and strengthen pluralism in our communities, not only through policy making, but through everyday actions. I believe we all share the views that consolidating national unity in a diverse nation such as ours must also be accompanied by international solidarity and understanding. To this end, deliberation and discussion such as this evening is truly commendable. To conclude, I would like to again extend my congratulations to Professor Shankari Sudara-Raman and all contributors to this book for their valuable and insightful work. I look forward to further discussion ahead. I hope no difficult questions. And to deepening the bonds between Indonesia and India, united in our shared vision of Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, unity in diversity. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. I now call upon Vice Chancellor Pandit, Professor Pandit, to please give her comments.
Respected Shri N.N. Vora, Professor Shankari Sundar-Raman, Ambassador Ina Krishnamurthy, and dear diplomats, academics, ladies and gentlemen. Let me at the outset congratulate both the editors and the contributors, especially Ambassador Shyam Sir and Professor Devre, whom I know from Pune University days, for their excellent contributions. I would not make all the points because I have an advantage of the others making the points, but I would like to draw certain ideas which greatly struck me while congratulating both the editors and the authors, because it's a very relevant book today, even to India at the present time. I happen to hail from the state of Tamil Nadu, and most of you know why I'm saying it. Because unity is not uniformity. It is not only religious pluralism, but also linguistic pluralism. And the choice must be with the citizen. Nothing can be imposed. And I think this issue is a very relevant issue, and I think it's reminding us that pluralism is a celebration of diversity. And it is essential, as rightly said by Her Excellency the Ambassador, that we have to, literally work hard at it to keep maintaining it whenever there are issues. So the main things that I wanted to see, because I don't want to, take one is the role of education and media and pluralism, which was dealt with in the book. Education shapes pluralistic values, that's what they've been, but the rise of misinformation and others become a major issue. In India also today, we are having this whole issue on whether we should have everything 1-1-1. I don't like one, because you have to give me the choice of what to do. And that is why I congratulate JNU, the faculty, the research scholars, always fighting for diversity, difference, and dissent. And I think it's very important for a democracy as well as for development. And it is here that deliberations, discussions, debates have to endure if we have to strengthen the democratic states that both of. And also the other thing that impressed me great is there have been a lot of information that only certain religions are a monolith. Here it has proved that in Indonesia, where Islam is the major, it's not a monolith. So they are as pluralistic as we are, or as different as we are. And that is a very essential thing that has to be done. The other idea that greatly I learned from this is contrasting the two models of pluralism and the lessons from the two nations. One was the nation building strategies. India institutionalized a quasi-federal democracy with affirmative action and regional representation, while Indonesia adopted a unitary model emphasizing a central control. India's approach allowed for greater political accommodation of diversity, whereas Indonesia relied on national symbols and language unification to maintain cohesion. You know, we are still fighting whether we should have a single language or not as a link language. And there is a huge controversy between the North and the South, that my state even at one time called for secession. And Ambassador Devre will agree today even Maharashtra is echoing the same thing. No. Sir, there is a latest statement that has come out. Raj Thackeray is there. So religious pluralism is the other. I think India embraced in constitutional secularism. I would rather say constitutional pluralism rather than secularism, ensuring legal protections for all religions, whereas Indonesia's Panchashila framework was something that where religious diversity was given primacy, but primacy was given to Islam. India's model has managed greater religious inclusivity. I think both have, because I would not agree that one is better than the other. Linguistic accommodation is something in India that we have tried to do, and India, especially with 22 official languages, we have to foster inclusivity. Even today, it is very difficult to impose a single language. I would rather say not 3 languages. If you want to be multilingual. Even the 3 languages, it should be my choice what I want to learn. It cannot be imposed on me or what I should learn. I think this is very important, and I think that is the thing that the state of Tamil Nadu is trying to put forth. Political representation, both democracies, and cultural continuity and exchange, economic inclusivity. The challenges to pluralism is something that greatly interested me, because coming from a state that doesn't speak the Hindi as its mother tongue, and for me Hindi is as foreign as English. Let me be honest, because my script also is nowhere close to the Devanagari script except Marathi, which is my karma bhumi. So that comes close, but let me tell you, Marathi and Hindi have no similarities, sir. Because let me tell you, poor Shivraj Patil on 26/11, in Marathi, Shiksha means education. And in English, in Hindi, it means punishment. I think reverse. Other way around, right. And poor man said for 26/11, Sab Atankwadiyam ko Shiksha dena hai. Meaning punishment, and you ran for 3 days on TV, heckling him hell. And that is why we South Indians are so scared to speak Hindi, because many times we make a mistake, because it's not my mother tongue, nor am I culturally attuned to those things. So that diversity has to be brought out, and I thought even the same with, I think Indonesia has succeeded better than us. And maybe we have a lot of lessons to learn from there. The last, I would say, the idea that I liked from the book is lessons for mutual learning. And this was wonderful. Let me congratulate once again both the, editors and the contributors for a very wonderful book on an area where we seldom have looked. Maybe the Look East policy has helped us to look more to this region where we have more similarities and less of conflicts with each other, and being obsessed with our Western neighbors. Thank you once again. Thank you.
Maybe if we can try for just 1 or 2, and then we can wrap up, sir, because we're running out of time actually.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you heard 3 very learned discourses on the contents of the book, main challenge, a quest. Now we have little time, because Her Excellency has to go away. We could entertain 1 or 2 questions if somebody wish to make. Note, please make a comment, raise a sharp question briefly. Yes.
Yeah, my name is Bagai. I'm curious to know why Indonesia had moved into a secular state while Pakistan, Bangladesh, which have so much in common in terms of religion, have moved the other way, considering the culture of India and Pakistan is so similar. And number two, what are we doing about encouraging tourism and mutual exchange of students and all so that India and Indonesia could come together?
Should we take another question together? Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah, one other question and then we'll.
I must congratulate the Vice Chancellor of JNU for having suggested that you look forward to the diversity from the students' point of view. Very nice, congratulations, because I had the other point of view. I thought you were the other way. Now I want to ask the Ambassador Krishnamurti. I come from an education faculty, so I was very interested to know whether you would include this book as a compulsory teaching curriculum in your curriculum in the higher education and universities, which is spread across all the islands in your country. It will be nice, because we are going to try to do it in our own university. It's very good for us to know. Thank you.
It appears, with no more question, please, it appears, Your Excellency, that you are much in demand. So I suggest that you please answer both the questions.
I will answer it maybe in a way of the easiest one, which is the curriculum. We will certainly send this to universities that we know it will be very welcome to have this kind of a understanding on pluralism and how unity in diversity is translated into, like I said, tapestry of issues, not only sectoral, economic, political, but it's like very diverse issues that you explore in the book. Thank you for the inputs. For the exchange of students, doctors, we have tried our best, sir. The first direct flights between India and Indonesia, thank God, we established it finally after 75 years of diplomatic relations. We established it only in 23. A lot of challenges because we are not a hub. We are at the end of the global south. It's kind of a challenge when it comes to traffic. The traffic that I mentioned that we have, the embassy tried to maintain is how for students coming to India to study, because you have one of the best education system in Asia, and at the same time we develop what we call sister hospital, health sectors based relationship cooperation. We also create a lot of MICE. MICE is meeting incentive conference and exhibition exchanges between us. And this year we're going to try to have movies, diplomacy, so that there is an exchange. Professor Shankari talked about Bollywood, but now you are one of the biggest industry in the world with Tollywood, Nollywood, you name it. So we need to learn from you. And then we want Indonesia part of the Switzerland of Asia, sort of. So the exchange, I agree with you, we need to increase more. There is an issue also on the image of India, the image of Indonesia. You mentioned in your first questions, and also everyone knows Indonesia is the biggest Muslim country in the world. Sometimes people mistakenly look at me and looking at my last name, they said, "Oh, are you Muslim?" Yes, I am a Muslim. But my name is Krishnamurti, is very South Indian. So the image needs a lot of work in a way of understanding. I remember in 21 when I did my fit and proper test, we have to do to go through parliament process. I remember the first sentence that I read, that I presented to the parliament, my parliament, I said, India is our biggest neighboring country, and the parliament member said, what? They don't know that India is our neighbor. Can you imagine? So, the lacking of understanding of India, Indian people, Indian friends about Indonesia being neighbor, also the lacking of understanding of ours, of India being neighbor is the same level. So we need a lot of work, not only understanding that we have, both countries have a very strong relationship for 2 millennia. Sukarno is the first chief guest of Republic Day. This year, Prabowo is the chief guest of 75th Republic. It's only skin deep. People need to understand who and what India is and what and how Indonesia is. And on secularism, I cannot answer on behalf of other country. We are not secular. Indonesia is not a secular country. We are a Pancasila country. So I cannot answer on behalf of any other countries, but for sure our principles is unity in diversity, which is Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, based on our constitution, which is Pancasila, the 5 sila. The principle number 1 is God, believe in God, and so forth. So again, about secularism, I have to underline Indonesia is not a secular nation. Thank you so much, sir.
Well, Professor Shankari advises me that it will be hazardous for me to continue any further. And with these words, I thank all of you for your patience and for coming here this evening. And we heard very fine analysis from Professor Shankari. And Vice Chancellor, Professor Pandit, has said something very new to us. And Her Excellency has made several things very clear as between pluralism and secularism and multiculturalism, managing diversity, living in diversity. Yes. Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time. Very, very grateful to you for coming. मैम को हेलो बोल के थैंक दोनों को थैंक करके Can I do my yes. My guru. I have so many guru in this room.